In this video, we're going to take a look at the cosine rule. So the cosine rule, just like the sine rule, allows us to find missing sides or angles in a triangle. We label the triangle in the exact same way as we saw for the sine rule. Let's just quickly draw our diagram here. Just draw a triangle here. It needs to be perfect, but just so we can see how we label this triangle here. Okay, so that's our triangle here. And what I'm going to say now is these angles here, so this angle here, I'm going to label this as capital A. This angle here, we'll label that as capital B. And then this angle here, we'll label as capital C. Like so. So now the opposite side here to this angle, so for example, this side here, that's opposite this angle A here, this would be lowercase a. That'll be little a. This side here now, opposite this angle here at B, that would be lowercase b or little b. And then finally here, this final side here, opposite this angle of C, that would be little c. Okay, like so. So for the cosine rule here, there's two ways that we can express this formula. Let's just write this down here. The cosine rule here. And this depends now on whether you're finding a missing side here or a missing angle. So let's start off here with missing a side. If you need to find a missing side here of a triangle, and we're using the cosine rule here, then we use the following formula. So a squared is equal to b squared plus c squared. So b squared plus c squared. And then we minus 2 bc cosine a. So we've got minus 2 bc cosine a there. Okay. That's for a missing side. This is for a missing side here. Make a note of that here. So now, if you want to find a missing angle here, using the cosine rule, then we simply rearrange this. Okay, and what we do here is make cosine A the subject. So we get cosine A. We get cos A is equal to b squared. We've got b squared plus c squared minus a squared. That's all divided here by 2bc. Okay, and that's for if we're missing an angle. Okay, so like I said, this formula here, this form of the cosine rule, this is just a rearranged form of this equation here. Okay, that's everything that we need there for an introduction now to the cosine rule here. So let's just take a look now at a couple of practice questions here for the cosine rule. Taking a look now here at question 1, we're being given this triangle, and we have to find the value of x, given our answer to 3 significant figures. So here we're looking for a missing side length. We need to make sure that we use the correct version here of the cosine rule. Let's just write this down to begin with. So the cosine rule here for a missing side length. So the correct version here is a squared is equal to b squared plus c squared minus 2bc cosine a. Okay. So cosine a here, this is cosine of the angle that we know. So this angle here, this 51 degrees, this must be a. And in that case then, the opposite side here must be lowercase a. Okay. And now for the two remaining sides here, it doesn't matter which we label as b and which side we label as c. If we just label this one here as b and this one here as c. Okay. So in this case here then, we've got a squared, which is what we're looking to find here, or find a anyway. So once we get a squared, we can just take the square root. That's going to be equal to b squared. If b is 9, that's going to be 9 squared. Plus c squared, so that's going to be plus 10 squared. Minus 2bc times that by cosine a. So we've got minus 2 times b here, which is 9. And what I'm actually going to do here, let me just put all this in a bracket. So minus, this is 2, times b here, which is 9, times that by c here, which is 10. 9 times by 10, and then we times this here by cosine a. So that's going to be cosine of 51 degrees. Like so. So now we just simplify this here. So a squared, 9 squared is 81, 10 squared is 100. We get 181 there. So 2 times 9, that's 18. Times it by 10, that would give us 180. We get minus 180 cosine 51 here. So now what we need to do here is evaluate this on our calculator here. So for a squared here, what I'm going to get then is 67.7223 and so on. We get 7223, and this keeps going on. Obviously, we just want a here, so I now need to take the square root here of both sides. So a is equal to the square root of this number here, and in that case then, if we just make sure that we give our answer to 3 significant figures here, we get 8.23 there. Okay, don't forget we're working in centimeters here, so we're going to get 8.23 centimeters. Now obviously, for this formula here, we've used a. I'm actually looking for x here, so therefore, x is equal to 8.23 centimeters there. Okay, and there we have it. So that's the solution there to question 1. And finally then, we just take a look here at one more practice question. We've got this triangle here where we know all 3 sides. We're looking to find this angle here, marked as x. So again, we're using the cosine rule here. We just need to make sure that we use the correct version of the cosine rule. So for the cosine rule here, we're looking for a missing angle this time now, using the version of the cosine rule here that goes as cosine A, which is equal to b squared plus c squared minus a squared, and that's all over 2bc. Okay, so this angle here, we're going to label that as A. That's the angle that we want to find here, so cosine A. In that case then, this side here must be A, because that's opposite this angle here of capital A, and then for the remaining 2 sides here, it doesn't matter which we label as B or C. So we'll just call this one here B, and this one here C. So in this case here then, we get cosine of A, that's going to be cosine of x here, the angle. We get cosine x, that's going to be equal to b squared, that's going to be 8 squared there, plus c squared, so plus 10 squared. We then subtract a squared here, so minus 6 squared. And then we divide all of this here by 2bc. So that's going to be 2 times by b, which is 8, times that by c, which is 10. So we simplify this here, 8 squared plus 10 squared minus 6 squared. So I get 64 plus 100 minus 36. So 2 times 8, that's 16. Times that by 10, that would give me 160. We just simplify the numerator here one more time. 64 plus 100 would give me 164. Minus the 36 there, I'm going to get 128 there. We get 128. That's all over 160. So this here, this is cosine x. So we're just looking for x here on its own. Let's go to the cosine here. We need to take the inverse here of cosine on both sides. That's the cosine here with a little minus 1 above it. So cosine, or the inverse of cosine here. On the left hand side then we'd simply get x on its own. On the right hand side here now we take cosine inverse of this fraction. That's cos with a little minus 1 of 128 over 160. So now if we evaluate this here on our calculator, what you should find then for x, making sure that you give your answer to 1 decimal place, you should get 36.9 degrees there. Okay, and there we have it. So that's the solution there to the very last question, question 2. And that brings the end of this video on the cosine rule.